All right, let's kick off here. Leveraging REST APIs in N-central, hosted by myself. Let's obviously go through some legal stuff like I do every boot camp. This content may contain forward-looking statements regarding future product plans or development efforts. What this basically means is if I talk about something that is on the roadmap, only because with APIs, we are adding more and more every release. So I probably will talk about roadmap. You cannot take that as a promise to deliver. I am not the executive vice president of our product team. I don't make product and priority decisions. Again, you can't take that as a promise to deliver. Okay, enough legal there. This is my young self. My name is Jason Murphy. I'm one of the head nerds here at Enable. I used to do what you are doing right now. I used to work for an MSP, a really large MSP. Then I left to become a director of managed services for a smaller MSP. All in all, I've been using N-central for well over 10 years and been in IT for well over 25 now. One thing I do want to tell you, and this is important if you just want to grab your phone, is we want your feedback. So if you could share your insights about N-central on G2, it's a website that does competitive analysis based on partner feedback. So if you can come on there and give us a review, it'd be awesome, and you will be eligible to receive a Amazon gift card. I mean, who doesn't want free stuff? So if you could just take a quick screenshot, or sorry, it's not a screenshot. One thing I will tell you is that I am not feeling very well. I'm not 100% today, only because I'm dealing with an eye infection and some cold type symptoms. So I apologize if I sound a little off today. I'm just kind of trying to work through it. Okay, so let's move on. One thing I do want to tell you about, again, grab your phone, is we have dedicated head nerd blogs. And what you can do is subscribe directly to those blogs, not the marketing stuff that you may get an email or what have you. These are dedicated blogs that you can read from myself, Paul Kelly, Joe Furla, Mark Andre, the various other head nerds like Stephanie, only because, we have noticed that many people have not been kind of looking at our content, so we want you to kind of pull that in if you are so interested. So take a QR screenshot of that as well, or you know what I mean in terms of a picture. One thing I will tell you is that every time you attend a boot camp, office hours, one of our partner advisory group or meetings, every time you're a reference, or if you attend a masterclass, you are accumulating points. And if you go to Empower, you accumulate points. Bear with me for 1 second, I'm sorry. I'm gonna try not to cough too much today. Again, we recognize all of the effort that you are putting in, and we will accumulate those points. And when we attend Empower, we will then give you an award. One thing I will tell you as well, last commercial, is we have a podcast. It's called Now That's IT, Stories of MSP Success. This is hosted by my good friend, Chris Massey. It is about all sorts of MSPs that have gone and become very successful, from owners to CTO to security practitioners. Check it out on things like YouTube, Spotify, and Apple. Okay, I'm going to do a poll, and those are always fun. So I'm going to start off by asking you, what are you trying to get out of today's training? So I'm going to launch that poll really quickly, and just fill it out. Let me know where you sit. Are you looking to understand N-central's new REST APIs? Are you looking to be able to export data from N-central, pull information out? Looking to get more advanced with N-central? Or, of course, number 4, all of the above. Okay, and I'll close that in about 5 seconds. And of course, I'll share that right now. 100% have said all of the above. And of course, I had a feeling that was going to be the answer. All right, so let's move on here. I'll close that poll or hide that poll. There we go. But I am going to do one more poll. Actually, I'm going to do one after this, only because that's the most important one. Okay, so I'm going to ask you, What is your experience level with dealing with APIs? The reason why I ask this is that if you are web developers, I can kind of speed through things, but if you're not, if you're a novice or say average, you've maybe tickled a couple APIs, let me know where you stand, okay? Okay. I was not anticipating this, so let me just close that and share. So we do have one expert. I can tell you, I'm not a web developer. However, I know the mechanics of being able to use APIs. So I'm going to be able to impart some of that knowledge. But if you are a web developer, maybe you just want to get up to speed on N-central APIs. Okay, so let me hide that. And last but not least, what version is your N-central server running? Now, this is an important question, only because with each individual release, we are adding more and more APIs. So I want to kind of get a semblance of where you guys are at with the versions that you're running. I'm going to be kind of working from 24.3, which you don't even have in your hands right now. But the reason why I am is because I run a development server. I use that for all of my testing and API troubleshooting. That's what our partners use as well. A lot of our partners, I should say, that want to use and see what's coming on APIs. So let me see what you have, and we'll close that, and I'll share that. 60% have said they are using 24.2. Okay, good. But there is another 40% that are only running 23.9 or 2023. Anyways, I'm going to fix that right now. Give me 1 second. I type out that. There we go. Full screen. And what we're going to do here is move over or maneuver over to the actual content here. Now, because some of you are running different versions, I'm going to talk a little bit about why that is important. But before I do, why go through this course? Okay. First and foremost, like all people in IT, we are generalists, and depending on your skill level, you may have not used APIs, maybe you have, maybe you've used SOAP previously within Central, and now you want to now get some ramp up on REST. But most, IT administrators aren't web developers, right? They have limited exposure to APIs. APIs on the surface can feel complex, we know there's API endpoints in N-central or various other systems. How do we query the information out? Now, and unless you've done that before, it takes a little bit of exposure. There are different types of APIs that exist, right? We're going to get into some methods around how to pull and push information as we go through. And you may want to connect to the enable and central APIs, right? Obviously, hopefully that's why you're here, right? You're going to want to eventually push information. There's not a lot of put or post actions in N-central today. More and more of that will definitely come as we grow and grow our gets. Okay, so a little agenda. This bootcamp is roughly about, I would say, well, I'll be honest with you, I've never delivered this bootcamp before. Paul Kelly has done it twice. I'm a little more methodical, so I think I'll probably end up around the 1.5 to 1:45 time range, based on, I know how Paul works and I know how I work. So I'll probably be about 1.5 hours. But we're going to get into some prerequisites around what you're going to need for today. We're going to talk about APIs, and then we're going to actually explore and use APIs. Okay, so for today, do you have administrative access to N-central? At least have access to N-central so that you can at least create an API account. So hopefully you're able to create accounts. N-central version 23.9 or later, which all of you have, well, at least you indicated 23.9 or later. The lab manual for this course. Now, I did send an email to everybody just before, but even if you didn't get my email, there is a handout section to the GoToWebinar. So go there and click on the link and download that lab manual because this is a lab-driven bootcamp. I'm going to do some things and then you're going to do some things, okay? Now, what we're going to do here is move on. Pardon me. Okay, let's talk a little bit about N-central REST APIs. Now, I'm heavily involved in N-central REST APIs. I have been working with our product management team. I have been working with our engineering team. I have been working with our partners all around REST APIs. Now, this is really important only because when it comes to N-central APIs, they're fairly new. SOAP has existed in N-central for, well, N-central well over 20 years. I don't know how long we've had public APIs in SOAP, but at least more than a decade because that's how long I've been using SOAP in N-central. Just know we are now doing this conversion, okay? Which hopefully you're all aware. There is a full list of SOAP APIs that can be found. I'm going to show you how to kind of navigate to get to both. You're probably not going to want to spend too much time on SOAP at this point, only because we are getting very close to some kind of parity around REST and SOAP, and eventually we're going to deprecate REST at some point. This is a bootcamp focusing on N-central SOAP APIs, which can also be found in EnableU. So if you want to review this bootcamp or any other previous bootcamps, by all means, head on over to me.n-able.com and then click into EnableU. There you'll see once you sign in, you'll see like a learning tab, and then you can find EnableU. Okay, and then you can search for REST APIs or bootcamps or what have you. Today, we're going to focus on the new REST APIs added to N-central from 23.9. Now, I'm going to probably also talk about a lot of the newer APIs that some of you just don't have, because I want to kind of expose you to at least what's coming, which will be handy, okay? Now, what is a REST API? We are all in technology. I probably don't have to explain what REST API actually stands for, but I'm going to do it anyways. It is representational state transfer application program interface, which obviously is fairly wordy, so we're just going to call it REST API. Some people also call them RESTful APIs, and that's fine too. Most people just call it REST APIs. Okay. Now, this is an architectural style of delivering information via an application programming interface. Okay. Excuse me. REST APIs enable communication between different software systems, okay? So for example, by using HTTPS, we are going to query something from N-central using methods like get or post or put or delete. We'll get into some of this as we go through. And then if we're using a get against that URL, we're going to pull information out of N-central based on how we're filtering and using PowerShell or Python or various other scripting methods to be able to pull that information out. REST APIs are widely used, and by the way, I know one language, and that is PowerShell. So we're going to be focusing on that today. I shouldn't say I know one language. I can play around with Python a little bit, but I would not be doing a bootcamp on Python. PowerShell, 100%. Okay, so REST APIs are widely used for creating web services that can be easily consumed by various clients. The reason why I'm using PowerShell is because I have spent the last 15, well, actually my entire career in two formats, either VBS, actually BASIC, then VBS, then PowerShell. So those are kind of my scripting languages, all right? Let's go back one. Now, no, I already went through this. Let's go on to this one. What type of account should you use in terms of talking to an API? One, a dedicated API account. And if you've never done this before in N-central, we're going to do this together, but we're going to use an API only user account from N-central. Why? Because if someone gets their hands on that, they're not going to be able to log into your N-central server through the UI or what have you. We're going to be disabling MFA. Obviously, with APIs, you cannot use MFA, at least using the method in N-central. Name it so it's clear and that it's an API account. Give it the least amount of privileges required for what you intend to do, something like what we call POLP, and generate the JSON web token and use that rather than regular authentication like username and password. Okay, so we're going to get into that right now. So let me just pull up my central. Hopefully it's still logged in. And it is not. Okay, good times. Let me just log in here. Bear with me for a moment. Let me just check one of my other browsers. One sec here. Nope. I must have closed it or did something with it. Oh well. So I'm going to go to my NFR server. This is my development server, and let's not have a typo on a boot camp. That could have been dangerous. So I'm just going to log in here. Okay, bear with me. Now this is my development server. If I break it, not a big deal. My DevOps team can spin up a new one really, really quickly. So I'm going to click continue. As you can see, any of the accounts that do not have MFA will pop up to the very front splash page. For today, I'm going to be working from system only because there's a lot of devices throughout here. So I'm going to be kind of working through that. Bear with me for a moment. Pardon me. So I'm going to be working from system. Obviously, you're going to be working from something like an SO, okay? And that is fine. There's no real difference other than I run system level on my NFR, so I'm just going to work from that to kind of have more information, more customers, that kind of thing. Okay, so first things first, we're going to come into administration. We're going to click on user management, and we're going to click on users. First things, and I know this is all the things that you've done before, but I'm going to walk through it just in case. We're going to create an API user. I always put API first, and then I go something like Jason, and the last name I will go Murphy, and then I will put API J Murphy, something like that. If I can type my name, there we go. And I'm going to keep that at system level, and this is going to be boot camp API account. I always give it a description, and then I'm going to set up a password here. And then I'm going to assign roles. I'm just going to use default administrator for all intents and purposes. Depends on what your API account is being used for. So you may want to also create a specialized role, okay? Access group, again, I'm just going to give it all access. And then what I'm going to do is, of course, I'm going to click on user details because I need to turn off MFA. So under user details, user information, I'm going to remove 2FA and I'm going to do MFA is not required. And then I'm going to click on over to API access where I'm going to check this off. You will not be logging into the N-Central UI using this account. And then I'm going to save. Okay, so I need to find that account now. And that was called API, where is it? Right here, okay? So this is my account. I need to go back into that account and do one additional thing. Once I've saved it, I need to create my JSON web token. All right, so I'm gonna use that for my testing today. And I'm just gonna open up Notepad. Now, if this is for you, I would also recommend adding this to your documentation tool or what have you, whatever you use for storing of passwords. Okay, I'm going to click OK, and there we have it. We have created the API account dedicated for N-Central. And again, just as a kind of a security disclaimer, you definitely want to create API accounts that are suitable for functions. Pardon me, 1 second, I'm sorry. The reason being is if you're creating an API account to do a specific task, like creating users or adding devices to N-Central, like an onboarding, you want to kind of create that, and there is documentation on N-Central for this. All right, so I didn't actually. Here, let me see what I can find. Enable documentation. We've got some time here. Let's just do that. Now, if I go API permissions, I think that's what I called the document when I wrote it. I think this is it. This is the one. All right, so you want to look for API user role permissions. It is pretty vanilla, but it does give you some basics. Basically, the rule of thumb in N-central is if you can do a task in N-central based on a role through the UI, it's the exact same visually, it is the exact same way through an API account. All right, so again, adding users, creating users, adding devices to N-central, that kind of thing. All right, so now that we've done that, what we're going to do is we're going to come back. I'm just going to move this over. Now, what can we do with these APIs? So we're going to do a bit of a review visually from slides, but I'm going to go into a few things in just a moment. So first and foremost, there are certain API categories that we have created. Okay, you can see that we have access groups. We can create and retrieve those access groups. We can actually pull information from the active issues view. Now, this is for a customer or site. This has not been opened up to all active issues, only through our own benchmarking and testing on larger servers. There have been some issues with that. So we haven't opened that up just yet until we can get in some rate limiting and some other stuff around being able to pull all of the active issues via REST. Obviously, the API service, this is a way you can test the API to make sure that you're getting information, that things are healthy, that kind of thing. Authentication. Obviously, there is two forms of authentication for N-central's REST API. One, we've just talked about the JSON Web Token, or the JWT. Another is what is called a bearer token or a refresh token. It's a token that expires, based on a time limit. And every time you run a script, you're going to have to ask it for additional time, or effectively time to be able to use the API. Custom properties. You're going to be able to retrieve and update custom properties. These include both those associated with org units and devices. Device filters. We now have a filters API. I believe that was added in 24.2. Retrieve a list of all the filters in N-central. This is handy when obviously wanting to filter down on data as well. So if you're, for example, wanting to retrieve all the information, underlying API information on a device, maybe you want to list reduce that to servers, for example. And tasks. The device task API allows you to get a list of tasks associated with a specific ID. Now, these are just some of the examples, but under each one of these are more and more what we call endpoints. Okay. Now we have devices API. So you're going to be able to retrieve information about a device, and we are adding more and more on that as we iterate throughout the rest of this year. The job status, retrieve a list of the job statuses for a given org unit, site, customer, SO. Org units, what are those? Organizational units, this is like the tenancy piece, right? The org units in N-central can be obviously sites, customers, SO, and obviously system, okay? So we don't normally work at system. Most partners don't have well, partners have system access, but typically that is through one super user account called product admin. Nobody really kind of uses that for day-to-day. You want to be actually using your SO level account. PSA, retrieve standard and custom PSA links and validate credentials. Schedule tasks. Now this is a pretty handy one, and we're going to go into this one a little bit later. But this is the scheduled task API, or what I tried to name as run script API. They didn't want to use that for whatever reason, but that's what it was called initially. Allows you to run scripts or automation tasks in N-central. User roles, retrieve and add user roles, and users, retrieve a list of users. Okay, so let's talk about Swagger. Cool name, right? What is Swagger? Okay, first and foremost, it is an API documentation tool. Every time we code in REST APIs based on a standardization format within the open API spec, basically the documentation kind of writes itself. Not in terms of like actual writing itself, but you're embedding the API information so that you, our partners, can use it. It has a interactive interface. If you want to do API testing, it has an API Swagger board that you're able to, use the APIs and get the information directly through the API board. So you're not, even if you don't have deep scripting abilities in PowerShell or Python or what have you, you can use the Swagger board to pull this information all just by using those two methods of authentication I was talking about earlier. And we're going to go through that in just a little bit. Standardization. This helps maintain consistency and adherence to standards by defining a formal structure of API descriptions using the Open API spec, formerly known as Swagger. So people call it both even today, right? I still use the word Swagger only because it sounds a lot cooler than Open API spec, right? So let's go through some of that. Let me go back to my browser. Hopefully I didn't close that. I did not, okay? First and foremost, when we were talking about SOAP and REST APIs, something you want to pay attention to, I'm just gonna copy my FQDN here. I'm gonna come over to here, let's put that over. I'm gonna paste in just my FQDN. First and foremost, if you want to look through what is called the WSDL or the SOAP documentation, you're gonna type in lowercase DMS. That is data management system. Let me hit enter, and then you will have effectively, this is not Swagger, by the way, this is just a feed that allows you to look through the WSDL or what we call our Java docs, okay? So all of the information around using SOAP is right here. However, that is a whole other boot camp. And by the way, we do a boot camp on SOAP APIs as well. But today, we're gonna talk about REST APIs. So I'm gonna go into that FQDN again. I'm gonna type in API-Explorer, okay? That's all you need is just this. It will resolve to /index.html /. Okay, now you can read through this. I'm not gonna read through all of this, but there are some things and considerations around using our N-central API service, okay? There's a lot of things that happen behind the scenes within Central in terms of what is going on with kind of the API, how it's built, etc. Okay, especially when it comes to pagination. You cannot just, especially like something with active issues, you cannot just query 20,000 records and expect that to get pulled in 5 seconds, right? There are certain load balancing techniques that have to happen with APIs, okay? So that's where you get into page size and page numbers, okay? And this is really important because you want to limit the number of records in some cases, right? If you have, when we have partners over 40,000 devices, hi Brian, how are you? But if you have 40,000 devices in N-central, you want to start using these two methods, okay? That's pagination, right? So you can do page size and page numbers. So again, if I come into, what is it, where is it here? It's usually, so if unspecified, the default is 50, right? Now, you can actually change that if unspecified, the default is 1, all right, in terms of the page numbers, okay? And then we're gonna go through. Now, this is running effectively 24.3, okay, which is not even released yet. It's still in, it's not even in RC. Or actually, it is in RC right now, but it's going into a beta phase just as of last Friday. But here's all of the APIs that we are working on. Now, I didn't give you the full list earlier because maybe some of these are going to move to 24.4, right? These are really kind of APIs that we're testing with. Like, for example, there is something called reg tokens. Historically, you could pull the reg token, but oftentimes you want to be able to create new or change it or what have you. So there are now some reg token APIs that we're working on, for a site, for a customer and an org. Okay, so again, adding those APIs each and every time. Now, but without me kind of going on a whole spiel about APIs and Open API spec, one thing, you can also click the link here. This has all of the information that you need for APIs. Now, pretty messy, isn't it? Not very human readable, but effectively, this is the API, Open API spec, okay? Now, obviously, there was a better way to kind of use these APIs, and I'll just kind of come back here. Let me close out of that. I don't need that. But you can actually take this information and use it in various tool sets, okay? Just to kind of let you know. Our mapping tools and things that will just ask you for, give me the open API spec in JSON format, and it will kind of be able to craft things for you. There is a tool for it. I cannot think of it off the top of my head. If Sebastian was on this call, I'd probably ask him. But there are tools out there. In fact, you can even do this with like ChatGPT. Okay. Now, first and foremost, when you want to come in and start using Swagger, and again, this is how you're going to learn. Like if you can code in PowerShell and you're really flexible with PowerShell, great. You know, you're in that more of that web developer phase. However, if you're not a big coder, or if you can only play around with PowerShell, this is a really handy way to being able to craft and build PowerShell, at least by visually seeing how to use these APIs. Okay, that's why I really love Swagger, right? Because I'm self-taught in PowerShell. Yes, I can code, not nearly as good as like Marc-Andre or a few others, or even some of our partners, but it's one of those things that, yes, while I can code, I still like to come in here and just pull the information sometimes manually very quickly. Okay, first and foremost, what we're going to do is we're going to take that JSON web token that I built earlier using my API account, and I'm going to come in here and I'm going to just paste that in, and I'm going to authorize. Now, if you're in 23.9, you will see that this is reversed. You know, the JW2 is at the bottom and the bearer tokens at the top. We do obviously change that as we go through. So I'm going to authorize, and then I'm going to close. Now that I've closed that out, I need to do that bearer token piece. So I'm going to come into API service, and I'm going to pull in here. Where is it? I don't believe it's that one. I believe it's this one. Okay. It's one of these. I'm having one of those days. I know why. It's authentication. That's why. I want to authenticate using the JWT. Like I said, I'm not feeling 100%. So I do apologize if I'm a little spacey here today. Now that I've done that, I want to authenticate. So I want to try it out. I want to execute on this particular API. Now that I have the JWT, this is all I really need. And then it's going to give me some information. All right. Now, what is all of this, right? And I can download it or I can copy and paste it or what have you. But again, it's going through and requesting through the URL and providing me a response body of code 200, which means, hey, great, you got an info, you know? So there are other codes as we'll talk about as we go through, but effectively, I want to just take this and I'm going to copy and paste that right into my other notepad. I just want to make sure that I got the EY and then I got the WA at the end, perfect. And I'm going to take that bearer token, is what it's called, or refresh token is another, what most people call it. And then I'm going to go back up to the authorize and I'm going to paste that in. Now, again, this is you are limited to 60 minutes with a bearer token. There are discussions right now happening around being able to customize that. When you start working with systems to systems, you want something that doesn't expire quite as often, or you have to actually include code that is always asking for the APIs. Anyways, long story short, we're exploring some other options around this bearer token. Okay, now I'm going to close again, and we can now tickle any of the APIs that are in here. Okay, so I'm just going to close this, and that is it. If I want to come into, what is a good one? I'll get customers, okay? So if I want to come here and try that out, and I want to execute, I need my customer ID. So there is supporting information that I need to provide. Okay, give me 1 second here. I'm gonna cough. So first and foremost, I actually need to retrieve my, what was it here? My customer ID. So if I want to come in and let's go into, sorry, pardon me here. Let me try that out and execute. Okay, it says it needs a description. Okay, so again, you need supplying information like the SO ID. Now, I know mine is, I believe my SO ID, let me just show you where to find that. Okay, so if I come into, I'm trying to remember, it's one of those days. Not users, defaults, agent probe settings. I'm having one of those moments. No, this is not it. I need to find the IDs. I know both Chase and Nick are on this call, so they can probably help me out. But effectively what is called here, if I go to my SO, I'll just do it at an SO level, and then I go to customers. That's what I want to do. I need to go to SO because I'm at the system level. And from here, I can go into Power, and then from here, I know I can go and find, you know what it is? We actually hide it from SO because I'm at system. So I actually need to go in here and go to customers. Customers. And there we go. We now have access codes. This is what I want. So effectively, I can do this, right? So if I want to pull information from a particular customer, right? So let's go here, not SO, I want customer ID. And then from here, I can now try it out, paste it in. And I may not get a whole lot because this is really just an example customer. There's nothing really going on. It should be able to pull all of that information regarding that particular customer site. Okay, and here it is. Now, what has it presented me just based on that customer? It's now not giving me a site name or a first and last name, but these are all the fields that some partners like to use, right? Like you'll give the customer a particular name or title or what have you, street, whatever it might be, okay? All of that information can be embedded and completed within the UI of Incentro, but programmatically, we're now able to retrieve all of that very easily. Now, if we come into, and let me just double check this. If I go into, do I have devices in here anymore? I do have a couple, right? So if I go into device, okay, it wants a device ID, right? So this is the important part, is like you need to be able to supply additional information. And again, there are APIs like customer and org units and what have you to be able to supply that within your code, okay? So using the API Explorer to get the information from Incentro. Now, again, I'm going to go through a couple other options here. So bear with me here. And I'm going to come back up to org units, and I want the one in the lab. It says to use API/customers, okay, which is, I believe it's this one right here. Retrieve a list of all customers. Okay, so now that I've come in here, I'm going to try it out, execute, and here we are. It has pulled a list of all of the customers in this particular Incentro. Here they all are. Now, that's awesome, right? I've got things like test customer number 3 or parent ID 271, right? So there's obviously a number associated to that particular customer. Okay, so 255, 136, etc. Now, I can also format this based on these options to the left here, right? So I can do it by page number, sort by, sort order, right? So I can do ascending, so there's a handy way to be able to use this. Now, I can also use this by some of the information that is in here, right? So like customer name. So I'm just going to copy that. One more, copy, and then I'm going to come in and within the sort order, okay, I'm going to do, or sort by, I'm going to put customer name, and then I'm going to put ascending, okay? And now I'm going to execute that again. Let's see, so I had 204 here, okay? And now chronologically, we're going all the way from the customer name, 1, 2, 3, 4, so on and so forth, okay? So all of them are now sorted by the customer name. And even when you build your PowerShell or your Python or what have you, you're going to want to filter on some of this as well, especially if you have, if you're one of the larger MSPs, you might have 1,000 different customers and sites, maybe more. So it's one of those things where, because you are some very larger MSPs are on this particular bootcamp. So it's one of those things where you want to be mindful of how you're retrieving that information, okay? Now I'm gonna do another example here, okay? You should see, these response codes, okay? So 200 being awesome. We're getting that response code of 200, we're getting data. There are some other ones, right? So if I come in here and if I get a 400, that effectively means that it's not quite correct. There's something wrong with the request, or maybe I'm not authenticating correctly, okay, 401. Or basically I've been forbidden, I'm not actually allowed to pull that. It could be a role or a permission issue. Okay. Something is not found. Or we could be having a particular N-central problem, all right? So we're not able to pull that. Okay, so I just want to kind of go through those response codes really quick. Okay. Now we can also do API devices. So if I go up to here to collapse that, and I go up to devices, retrieve the list of devices. Okay, so I'm going to open that, try that out, execute, and here I have a list of all of my devices. Now, this is I think I've got maybe 50 devices in all of this N-central server, right? So it's just now pulled all of the devices and provided me at least some information like IP address, name of the device, okay, operating system, device class, server type, blah, blah, blah. Now, the important part here is when we're retrieving this, we're going to be building out more and more information under the device. None of those awesome fields in asset is kind of exposed just yet. We're going to get into that obviously a little bit later as we build more and more of these APIs out. Okay, so I just wanted to kind of show you that one. What else did I want to show you here? I think that's good. I think that's a good start. So what I'm going to do is make sure that you can do that too. So if we can just go in here and play around with that. I'm going to give you 10 minutes to play around with this one, only because some of it is going to be beneficial as we get into lab number 4, okay? All right, so we're back. What we're going to do is we're going to move on to lab number 4, using the API Explorer to run a task in N-central. So using that schedule task API. Okay, so first and foremost, let's go back to Swagger, where are you? Okay, which is this. We're going to push a particular task into N-central. But before I do, I want to go into N-central and let me just log back in to review a few things. There we go. And we're going to navigate down to configuration and then schedule tasks. And then we're going to click on the script and software repository. Now, what we programmatically want to do is invoke a automation script to run on a number of devices or a particular device or what have you. A couple things before we do that is I'm going to scroll all the way down to the bottom only because I want to use a kind of simple use case is Windows UAC setting status. Okay, so I'm going to use this one. But no, in your N-central, most of this stuff is turned off. Now I've turned it off for my own automation testing or what have you when I was building out an integration with Halo. So we're going to turn that back on. And then you can see that there is a repository ID. Now, first and foremost, I'm going to come back into here. I'm going to open up this. And this is what the format really looks like. Okay, so I'm going to pull that into my, where are you, Notepad? Where'd you go? Right here. Okay, and I'm just going to come down. Now, in order to do this, I'm going to want to format this particular JSON. All right. Now, what I'm going to do here is when it comes to the name, I want to use something that is always original, right? So in this particular instance, I'm going to put bootcamp JMM. That's me. Okay. And then there's a task ID. Okay. So that is, if I go back into here, that is this. Even though it's called a repository ID, it is uncentral. Nothing's always going to match. As you noticed earlier, sometimes we call it an access code. Sometimes we call it a customer ID. It is what it is. All right. So I'm going to come back to here, and I'm going to put this. And then I have my task type. Now, this is an automation policy, so it's going to be called Automation Manager Policy. I think that's correct. Let me just make sure the notes are. No, it's not. It is not manager. It's just automation policy. There we go. Automation policy. And we're going to do this on a particular customer. Now, in the lab, you would have used a particular customer. When I was running my examples before, what customer did I use? Org units. And we used I'll just use 149. Okay. And I'll come back and format this again. So 49. And then I have my device ID. Let's grab that. So if I come back into here and close that, pardon me 1 second. Excuse me, I didn't want to cough in your ear. Go to devices, retrieve a list of all the devices. So again, come in and grab a particular device. And I'm just going to use this one. Now, obviously, the device has to be associated to the necessary customer, which in mine just isn't. Where is it? So this is customer ID. Let me just change it to 231 just to make it consistent. Otherwise, it's not going to work. If that device isn't under, customer ID 149, it won't work. Give me 1 second, please. My apologies again. We'll get through this together. Okay, so here we have the device ID. And paste. Okay, credentials, I'm just going to leave this as local system null. Now, you can also include parameters. Now, there is no parameters just to run this UAC. So I can actually just come in and back all of this out. I believe it's been a while since I did this. So I think it looks like, here, let me just look at. So parameters, and then I can get rid of this and this and this. That I think looks correct. It should look something like this. I know it looks kind of wonky in terms of like what the JSON actually looks like, but this should do it, okay? Because there are no input parameters to supply, okay? Now, if I want to use now that scheduled task API, I can come down, try it out. I can now fill this out, and I should be, providing that I did it correctly, execute. Okay, it worked. Okay, so nice and easy. We just got some information about this particular script that we ran. Now there's other things you can do as well to like verify or what have you. So if you come in here, you can actually get the status. Where is it? Retrieves aggregated status for a given task. or gives you the details of that particular task. So you can do that as well. Oh, I need the task ID, which was, where's my notepad? That's actually in the, so if I go back to here, there has to be a task ID. I forget where that is. Name. There it is. Okay. So the response body, you're going to grab this, and then you're going to come back, and in that, try it out. Okay. It gives you information about the task, you know. Then you can download that or what have you. It's kind of like what we do visually through the UI. Okay. And what we're going to do is we're going to move on to you. Okay. So lab number 4. We're going to give you 15 minutes to do this one, and then we're going to go into PowerShell. Okay. If you guys have any questions on this lab or anything else, please let me know. Okay. Thank you. Okay, so we're back here, and now we have one more lab that we're going to finish up with, and it's called Using PowerShell with REST APIs. Now, not only am I not feeling well, whenever I don't know if you've ever been to one of my PowerShell boot camps, but I'm a good copy paster. I'm not a good on-the-fly coder, only because I make plenty of errors, and then I have to backspace correct, and doing that live is just not one of my fortes. Mark is great at it. Mark can just type and code and talk all at the same time. Sometimes I have a hard time chewing bubble gum and walking. All right, so what we're going to do here is go through a few things around using PowerShell with REST APIs. Now, first and foremost, I want to point you to, let's go over to, where did my browser go? Where are you, in Central? No, that's not it. There we are. And then I'm going to point you over to, if you go to me.n-able.com, you don't even need to sign in. But if you come over here and you want to click on resources and then go into the automation cookbook, I do want to point out that my good friend Paul Kelly has included code examples. And these are functional code examples. So we're going to go into a few of these, like export all devices, right? So we're going to use that one, okay? Now I'm going to download that. I'll save it. And let's go into folder. And I have zero trust software I need to turn on. Give me 1 second. Walk through, something like that, okay? And give me 1 moment, my friends. A necessary evil. And we're good, okay? And that should be open, there we go. I'll move that over here, okay? So I'm going to now open this up using Visual Studio Code, which is what all of the cool kids use to do PowerShell. All right, so a little disclaimer, this script will retrieve a list of devices on your N-Central server. The list contains customer ID, customer name, customer site, device ID, device name, device class. You can also export this information to a CSV by removing the hash on the export to CSV line, which is somewhere near the bottom, I believe. Boom, boom, right here, okay? Now, you'd want to change that path to something recognizable, but that's exactly what we're going to do, all right? So first things first, let's kind of go through it. You can see that there are functions, right? So if I collapse this, we now have a function that is now included. You can actually create a comprehensive API script it does exactly what you want it to, right? So what we're going to do here is we're going to use something like this, and bear with me for 1 second here. I have forgotten one important piece. So if we come into the manual, you got to authenticate. Come on, man. So if we come down into the manual, we have examples of how to do this kind of stuff, right? So between using our cookbook examples and what is in here, we're going to be able to exchange that JSON Web Token for an access token, okay? So you would want to append this into your info. Oop, come on, man. Work with me here. Let me just blow that up a little bit. Sometimes PDFs just aren't fun at all. Now, you can do this entire thing. So you can include all of it, right? So if we want to just kind of go in and include, I should have probably pre-built this before I did the lab, but let's go into here. And again, this is where you're going to put in your FQDN, nfr.n-able.com, and then I'm going to use that JSON Web Token, but I'm probably pretty certain at this point my refresh token is already gone. So where did Notepad go? But we're going to try this out and see what happens. If I get in there, it is what it is, okay? And then what we're going to do is we're going to play that. And of course we get in there. I already felt that was coming. So either way, I did want to point out that you can use, let's come back to, let's get out of here, to the lab. Where'd you go? There we go. That you can use this to include in your scripts, but also there's various other examples in here as well. Now, I will tell you, if you want a complete list of all the functions available in N-Central, this is based on 24.3, but you can see actually when they were introduced. Okay? So this is a comprehensive list that Paul has been nice enough to maintain for you. Okay, so if you want to, for example, upgrade from 24.2 to 24.3, you're going to be able to see exactly why and what is coming in 24.3. Okay, so I just wanted to point that out. There's a complete list of function calls available in the N-Central SOAP APIs version 1 and 2 combined. You're probably just not going to use this, but if this is something that you still want to do, I would even highly recommend using Adrian Sluis. He's written a PowerShell provider for N-Central, so that is much more, much better. So what I'm going to tell you to do at this point is you're going to complete lab 5. Where are you here? Oh, we're not doing lab 5. My apologies. Everyone, I really appreciate your attendance, and look at that. I'm almost a little earlier than the hour and 45 minutes that I predicted. I just want to say thanks to all of you again for attending this bootcamp. You're taking time out of your busy schedules. And next week, we actually have PowerShell. So if you don't know how to code in PowerShell, or if you want a refresher, or if you want to learn some basics around PowerShell and how to start and all those things, come on over. I believe it's next Wednesday, and you can find that on n-able.com/events, and you can register there. Everyone, have yourself a great day, and we will see you again soon. Take care, everybody.